Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our fourth segment of New Hampshire Rainbow's virtual speaker series. My name is Jackie. I am Grand Charity in New Hampshire. I am also a current sophomore chemical engineer at the University of New Hampshire. So it's very exciting to be talking to another female engineer, and I hope that everyone will learn as much as I will tonight. Tonight we'll be learning how to make the laws of the universe work for us with help from Christine McKinley, who is an engineer, musician, and author. So welcome, Christine, and thank you so much for being here.
That's a pleasure.
So we will be referencing a couple segments from her book, which I have right here. So it is available on Amazon, and I recommend everyone to go read it as the event is over. So without further ado, so we're gonna have Christine talk about herself a little bit. So Christine, you graduated with a mechanical engineering degree. Could you describe maybe what made you choose that path among others that you were perhaps considering?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wasn't that great at math and science in high school, or I survived them, but they weren't the classes that I was most comfortable in. So it is a little bit strange that I would choose mechanical engineering. What happened is I gained a really awesome stepdad when I was 13 years old. And just loved him. And he adopted me. That's where I got my name, McKinley. He was really determined. He didn't have a college degree. My mom didn't have a college degree, and they were determined that I do something that I could support myself with. They didn't have, the resources or really the mentality to send me to college to learn anything that wasn't super practical. So he really nudged me toward engineering, and I hadn't even been taking really intense science in high school, but I went ahead and took chemistry and took physics, and I loved physics. And I was so glad that he sort of nudged me toward that. And so as I was loving physics, my mom and I went to the library, this was in the old days, in the 80s, and looked up starting salaries for people graduating from college. And I had grown up on food stamps and, not having nice clothes and not always having a car that ran, and in Alaska, not always having heat. And so I was really determined that I make good money. It was really important to me. And so I was a little nervous about declaring mechanical engineering, but my stepdad kind of convinced me that I could get through it if I studied hard. And so I decided to do it. And I really wanted, as a little blonde girl, I wanted to show that I was really smart, and I wanted to be, I guess I wanted to be important. I wanted to work on important things that mattered to the world and not just be ornamental, And so this seemed like a really obvious way to say to the world, I'm a person of substance, I'm intelligent, I have good ideas, and I have a place in the world. And whether it was mechanical or electrical or civil, I really didn't know. I just chose mechanical because my dad was a mechanic.
That's really awesome. And I think that's really important for girls today to learn. It's important to show the world, like, you're not just some pretty face, you're a person of substance.
Yes, and you can solve problems that they can't. And there's no better thrill at the beginning of my career being in a room with all men. They were usually all older than me, and it would come down to a problem, that we're solving in a construction site or at Intel, installing a big tool from another country. And I would realize, like, they really didn't know the answer, and I really did know the answer. And it was the first moment that I thought, oh my God, I actually know more than these old guys, because that wasn't their specialty. They were doing something else, but it was the most heady feeling to suddenly my confidence just got a big boost. I just felt like my whole posture changed and the way I operated in the world changed. It's like, I'm an important person. Like, it's pretty exciting, And I was determined not to be poor. I mean, that's the reality. If you're not getting an inheritance and you're not coming from a family with money, you need to think very seriously about how you're going to buy a house. And if you want to go on vacation, then have nice clothes. And I love clothes and shoes. So I wanted to be able to get all that for myself. I'm greedy.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
One of my goals is to like be able to go to Disney whenever I want. So like,
Yes. Yes, yeah. I went to Maui with a couple friends, and we had like of the four friends, there's one that just had, has a kid and she's a working musician and doesn't have a lot of money. And I was able to say, you know what? You're going to stay in my hotel room and you're sitting next to me on the plane and I've got you covered. And it was like the best feeling just to be able to say, this is your birthday present. Shut up. And just, I mean, it wasn't huge, but it was just like, God, what a fun thing to be able to do.
so among other fun things, you also were able to go into music. Could you describe the like what made you go into music and like how it's been?
Yeah, that was one of those sort of surprise things in college. I just, loved sort of alternative music in high school. I would listen to the Berkeley radio station because I was in the Bay Area, and a lot of British bands, and had a group of friends in high school that for us music was really important. Elvis Costello and the Clash and Irish punk bands, and we're just really into that whole scene. And so college, I sort of continued that interest, and I went to a college that was right between Los Angeles and San Francisco, so I'd see a lot of really good bands. And I remember thinking, I could do that. Like I could play bass and sing, and I can do that. And I could like I just kind of got like a $50 bass and learned how to play, and asked some guys if they needed a bass player, and ended up in a band that was opening for some of these sort of bigger acts. Just because I could kind of envision it, that it wasn't going to be that hard for some reason, especially after you're already in an engineering program. Everything else seems like a cakewalk, my God. And so I started playing, and it was another income stream. Like it was something that kept me fed in college. And then after college, I just kind of wanted to take a break from engineering, knowing that I had this powerful degree and I could return to it when I needed to, but I could take a moment for myself and just, live on wait tables and do whatever I needed to do and do gigs here and there. And I wrote a group of songs that I really liked and recorded them, and got a little record deal, not a huge one, but I was able to tour and open for some people that I really admired and get some songs on TV shows, and just kept plugging away, plugging away, plugging away, trying to get some press and, getting better on stage, and just like any skill, just keep plugging away at it. And I just sort of loved it and knew that I always had that engineering degree, like, and I wanted to go back to that at some point. Um, it was just curiosity. I was kind of like, well, let's see how far I can go with this. It's a shot in a million, but what the hell?
So after you graduated with your degree, you didn't necessarily go into a job with mechanical engineering?
I didn't. Yeah, my parents said, they were very clear. They said, once you get that engineering degree, you can join the circus for all we care. We just want you to have that as your armor in the world. Like that's your thing that you can do. And it wasn't like I wasn't interested in it. I loved some of my classes in junior and senior year. I thought they were fascinating. But I just was really, I knew the musician thing had a short window. You don't do that after you retire. You do it early on when you're willing to, share a house with 8 bandmates and eat ramen. So I just took that shot knowing that I was going to be an engineer for sure. And it was sort of interesting, like when bandmates or, publicity folks would find out that I had that degree, they would try and make a big deal out of it. And I was like, nah, let's not do that. But yeah, you can go get your degree, as you know, and then go, be a painter in Paris for a few years. It's not, you have a degree that will last.
That is very true.
Mhm.
So another hat that you have is a host on the TV show Decoded.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I know we have a couple fans in the audience tonight.
Yeah, well, it's sort of a silly story, I went down to Los Angeles. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I went down to Los Angeles for a big construction job with the community college system down there. And while I was there, I just got invited to an audition because like new producers who knew people, because I had been working on some musician, I was working on a musical that was getting produced in Portland. So I had a bunch of sort of theater type friends, and it was over at someone's house for dinner basically. And they said, oh, someone, this producer's looking for a scientific woman to be like a skeptic on this show, like, X-Files type skeptic. And they said, you should go to the audition. And I just thought it was the most, ridiculous thing. And went, and it was like rock climbing, and it was just like the craziest audition where we're supposed to like argue on camera with these random guys that they brought in, and neither of them were Buddy or Scott, the guys who ended up on the show. So I was the only one at this massive audition. And there was a woman there who's like she was a scientist from Cambridge, and she was also a model, and she was half Indian and half British. And I was like, well, obviously this is her gig. So she's got this. I'm not going to get this. And I just made friends with her. And then we went out afterwards and just laughed about the whole thing. And then I got the call back. I was like, wait, you can't be serious. And then it kept just going and going until, we'd had enough meetings. Then I was looking around and said to the producer, why am I still here? And they said, well, you're on the show. Like, oh, wow. Okay. So I don't have any acting experience, and just said what I thought, on camera, and quickly learned that that wasn't acceptable, that I was going to need to be a lot more quiet, because I would say something on the first day of shooting. They're like, no, we're going to get there in a week, but you're killing the journey. It's like, oh, okay. It was
That
fun.
is super cool.
Well, the first season, did I tell you the first season, I wasn't allowed to interview anyone on my own or drive the car because I'm female.
Oh,
It was made me pretty angry. So I got a little bit sullen in that first season. And then the second season, I said I wasn't coming back unless they treated me as an equal cast member. And they threatened to sue me, and it got ugly. And then it all worked out.
yeah. We have to stand up for ourselves.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it was good for women for me to go and just be ornamental and not ever drive and not ever interview anyone on my own. I felt like I had as much to offer as Buddy and Scott, and they backed me up. There are good men out there.
And so last but not least, you wrote the book Physics for Rockstars. So what was the inspiration to write that book?
It was really just conversations with mostly musician friends who didn't study physics or chemistry and didn't really like science in high school. And we'd be on road trips or something, and they'd say something about a shooting star. And I was like, wait, you don't really think that's a star, do you? Like, they would say, these were really smart people who would say things that were not smart. And so I would start explaining things to them about, just gravity and space, and they were fascinated. I realized, oh, people who didn't, necessarily don't feel like they're great at physics, you can engage them pretty quickly if you make a story out of it. And I had a great high school physics teacher who, instead of saying, there's an airplane flying at whatever miles an hour, would say Santa Claus and his reindeer are flying at 100 miles an hour. So he would make it really silly and fun in a way that I thought, well, I could take that to the next level and make it silly and fun, but on like an adult level where it's about, dating, and it's about, drinking games and stuff, and just put a little bit of salt in it. And make it really funny. And I knew that after that first season of Decoded had aired, that I had, what they call like visibility or TV FaceTime or whatever. And at that point, I wrote the proposal for the book really quickly, and really quickly got a literary agent, knowing that I had this small window to do that. Before, like right now, if I sent it out, they'd say who, but at that time, I was recognized in airports and grocery stores and stuff. And so that was my moment to go ahead and strike and write this book that I'd been thinking about for 10 years.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never would have thought about like the specific windows, especially
Yes.
um like regarding like visibility on TV,
Yep.
relating to like being able to write a book successfully.
And being
That's
a musician when the music industry is for frankly they like to put young good looking people on stage, not people my age. So, and if you're like, my niece is a professional athlete, and she said to me, do I do college or do I do athletics? I'm like, this is your window, man. You got to go get it, and then know when it's over. Know when it's like, okay, that was my window for doing that, and now my window for owning an engineering business, which is now blowing up. Like, this is the time I need to focus on this. You can have 6 different careers. If you're a dancer, do it now. You're not going to be a 50-year-old ballerina.
yeah.
You can be a 50-year-old dancer, but probably not a professional ballerina.
Yes. So regarding your book, I know there were some wild examples. Was that difficult to come up with, or was that, pretty
Oh,
natural for you?
those are the best. Those are the most fun. Like, she's talking about these crazy examples of things like, get 12 cheerleaders on a beach and make a pyramid and then jump down, to the point where my editor said you have to put a note in the front saying tell them people not to do these things, like, or we'll get sued because someone's going to get hurt. Those were the most fun. Yeah, like ride a motorcycle off a dock and see how, whether the motorcycle or you lands first, but don't really do it. I was trying to embody, like, if you had the coolest physics teacher in high school that you could imagine, who had no sense of propriety or danger, what would she be like? And just almost make it like Dead Poet Society of Physics.
Yeah, I feel like there are not many science teachers out there who are willing to go the lengths that you did for your
Right.
examples.
Well, they can't, because I'm not a teacher. I'm allowed to say things like this. But if you're a
True.
teacher, of course you're going to get in trouble if you say something like that or talk about chemistry in the way I do.
Um, just a reminder to everyone, as we go through the presentation tonight, do not hesitate to ask any questions in the chat. I'll be looking and we'll make sure that your questions get answered. But moving on for now, we are going to look at a couple segments of her book. So the first one that I really liked was the Know Your Type chapter. And so you did a really cool thing with associating the periodic table and like the different types of elements with different types of people and like their dating habits. So
Right.
do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm hoping everyone has some familiarity with the periodic table. It's the list of elements in the universe, and it magically sort of lines up. Jackie would know more about the history of how that happens, but lines up by how many electrons and protons. And they all have sort of, the rows have different types of behavior, whether they bond really easily or they don't bond at all, or they bond maybe a little too easily. So to me in high school, it always looked like we were talking about, when they started talking about attraction between molecules or atoms, I was a little like, the way I understood attraction as a 16-year-old girl was, and I was learning this at the boys' school, by the way. We had chemistry and physics at the boys' school, and I went to a girls' school. So the way I understood attraction was between humans. And so I would always kind of make these atoms like little people, like, oh, carbon likes to date oxygen likes to date 2 people at once, and like helium, like I am, don't like to date at all. Like, they like to stick to themselves, or maybe they'll date quietly and not tell anyone. So I thought that was like a useful tool for understanding the periodic table, is to sort of, what's the word when you anthropomorphize? What's the word when you make something human that's not human? I did that a lot in the book, where you make atoms like little people who are dating. and I was hoping that that would help people remember, like, this row is like sort of the sloppy Marilyn Monroes of the world, and this row are the ones that like to do like baby showers and brunch, and that's not me. And then the like the helium and kryptonite stuff, just like kind of have all they need and don't really need to bond. I had a friend read the chapter. She's like, are you trying to help people understand dating through chemistry? Or are you trying to help people understand chemistry through dating? I was like, oh, that's a really good question. I think I think I was trying to help people understand chemistry by using something we kind of already know, that there are people's types. But as I was writing the chapter, I realized that it was comforting to me because I'm always that person that people are trying to set up. Like I'm always the third or fifth wheel, and they're always trying to like, why can't you find a man? And I'm like, no, I'm good. So I felt like here was, you know, the noble gases, like here was something in nature that didn't really like have to be connected to something. And I was like, well, maybe I'm not a freak. I'm just, this is my nature, and that's okay. So it became like a chapter about like, it's really okay just to be whatever the heck you are, because there's a model for that in nature. And there's no one judges kryptonite, you know, or tries to set them up with carbon.
A quick question that kind of kind of relates to that is, do you have any faith in like the mainstream personality tests, like the Myers-Briggs test or anything like that?
Yeah, in fact, when I was a contractor out at Intel, they do, I forget which one it is, where it's got the I and the E and the S and something, but they do those tests and then they put the results on their desk so that when you go up and talk to people, you already kind of know how they communicate and how they relate and the best way to give them information. So I think those are fantastic. Yeah. And I've had to take to work at nuclear power plants, you have to take not those personality tests, but you have to take it's called the something I, the Minnesota, whatever. It's to check to see if you're mentally stable in case something happens at the nuclear power plant, you have to lock down. So I've had to take a lot of those, and they're strange. If you've ever taken those, you know, literally there's a question that says, do you like tall women? Like, well, I am one, so I'm okay with them. And one of them was, do you believe that space aliens are speaking to you through electronic devices? And people are in a room taking this class, and you can hear people erupting giggles when they hit those questions. But if you answer anything wrong, you can't work at the nuclear power plant. And it seems to be working because we don't have a lot of people taking over control rooms of nuclear power plants. But yeah, I think those personality tests are very well researched. But I prefer the periodic table.
Another chapter that you mentioned was your favorite was the No, You're Not Alone chapter, which was the one all about gravity. Do you want to talk about why that resonates so much with you?
So in the book, she's talking about a chapter about gravity, which is which Galileo determined a long time ago, is that if you drop a Buick and a coffee cup, they land at the same time, which is sort of startling and a little bit counterintuitive. You know, heavier things actually don't accelerate any differently if you don't think about like a feather drops more slowly because of air resistance. So on the moon, you could drop a feather and a marble and they land at the same time, or in a vacuum. And it's kind of a shocking thing when you really see that and learn it in high school or in adulthood or whenever you learn it. And in high school, when I learned it, I was at a private school, and my parents did not have a lot of money, so thank goodness we were all wearing uniforms, because no one could tell who didn't have money and who did. And I didn't live in a great town. We had bars on our windows, and my friends weren't allowed to come into my town and pick me up. I had to take the bus out. And I had been raised on food stamps, and my mom's epileptic, and you know, just a lot. There was a lot to make me feel less than. And I was doing well academically, and I was doing well socially, and but I still felt like maybe they could see, maybe someone could tell that I didn't deserve to be there, or that I was from a trashy background, or I was from the house that always had the ambulance and police in the driveway when I was a kid. And there was something about learning the laws of physics in general, but also, specifically learning the laws of gravity, that all objects are treated equally, no matter what they're made of and where they're from and how big or how fancy they are, they all drop at the same rate from a bridge and hit the water at the same time. And I learned that right about when things were happening in my friends' lives, that people, that the fronts were kind of falling apart. Like a friend of mine who had a beautiful house, and we had, driven her dad's Cadillac to the junior prom and stuff. They lost everything and declared bankruptcy, and it was really traumatic for her, and she had to leave the school, and things were happening to the kids around me. And I thought, oh, I'm not any less lucky. I might actually be more lucky because I understand how to navigate the world. I'm a little tougher. So there was something incredibly weirdly comforting about learning the law of gravity specifically, and the laws of physics, that there is a playbook to the universe, and there's no way the universe can pick on me because it doesn't even know how to do that. The things that happened to me just happened, and that I can head out into the world with as much confidence as anybody else, which is a little bit of a strange thing to take from physics class, but that's kind of where it began for me, is this idea that I was already learning New Testament and Old Testament because it was a Catholic school, but there were a lot of inconsistencies going on there that weren't that comforting to me. Not terrible, but they just weren't as comforting as physics and chemistry class. Like, things line up in rows, literally. Matter lines up beautifully. Gravity works every time. It never fails you, and you can never avoid it. There was something about that that just set me on a straighter course somehow. I know it's weird. Everyone gets their sort of comfort from different places.
One moment, please.
Okay.
So do you have
So what do we think?
I know, like,
Yeah,
I feel like this can relate a
you
bit to the next chapter
Which,
that I was
yeah.
going to talk about, check your direction, which is all about momentum.
Yes.
So I think that when you were talking about this in the video on your website, which was really cool, about like the more momentum you get on your path, for good or bad, like it's very hard to stop that.
Yes.
So do you want to expand a little bit
Sure.
on that?
Yeah, and that one is so important, I think, for people your age and younger to hear, is that once you start, there's this law, conservation of momentum, and that is, if your car is going really fast in one direction, it hits ice, it's going to continue in that direction. It doesn't know to change direction. And I think our lives do that too. When we become accustomed to being disciplined, or we become accustomed to, melting down every time there's a problem, that creates a momentum in a certain direction. And if you choose friends, that are kind of a mess, then you're already in the kind of a mess direction. And it's really hard, if the longer you stay in that rut, it's really hard to change directions. You'll see that when you start seeing your friends dating, you'll have that one friend who picks a bad guy over and over and over. She's so used to it that's just becomes the thing she's used to. And there are much better, psychological and psychiatrists, much better psychological reasons that psychiatrists could explain for this. But to me, it just comes down to physics. And so you can make one silly choice. Maybe you go out and you drink too much one night and you're hungover the next morning, and that is like one dot. But if you're doing that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that is now your new plan. That is the path you're on, is to become a full-blown alcoholic. So you really need to watch the little things you do habitually. And look, I mean, I think I used the example in the book that I I was thrown in jail because I was undecoded and we went somewhere we shouldn't have gone, and I ended up in jail. And that isn't my normal direction. I haven't gone to jail since. I hadn't gone to jail before that, and so I was surrounded suddenly by all these people for whom jail was quite normal. They were like, "Oh, hey, Rick, how you doing? How you doing, Angie? Another DUI?" Like they all knew each other, and they were drug dealers and the drug dealers' customers, and they had a whole society going. And this was not weird for them at all. And I thought, oh, okay, but for my, checking my direction, that is me, but for checking every small decision I make, this is my future right here, or could have been my future. And it's the same, it's the same lecture we give every 12-year-old about drugs and sex and making smart choices and watching your back and making sure the friends you hang out with are making good choices as well. But there's real consequences to them, and it's not fun. It's not fun to be that loser who's going to jail and doesn't have any money, and their health is a mess, and it's not, there's nothing cool about it. It just takes away all your freedom. So that was to me, it's just, if you can explain it in terms of momentum, I think that takes all the judgment and all the, even religion out of it, and just says, like, where do you want to be in 10 years? Well, then if that's where you want to be, then don't even look in those other directions. Don't even play.
Do you have any tips or advice for either keeping yourself on the right track, or like making sure like your friends or your family stay on the right track?
Yeah. So first of all, you can't make sure your friends or family stay on the right track. No one will listen to you. And at your age, at this point, they're not your job. As painful as that is, I've had some friends go really down the wrong path, and even had a couple of musician friends overdose and die. And it's heart-wrenching, and you can't do a thing about it. But for yourself, I heard this somewhere and it totally works. Be in service. So add 5 years to your age. Be in service to her. So how old are you now, Jackie?
20.
Okay, so think of 25-year-old Jackie and do everything to make 25-year-old Jackie's life amazing, including making good memories. So it's not just like, I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to be super fit and I'm going to make a bunch of money, but also like, you want to look back and go, damn, I went to Coachella when I was 23. That was cool. Like, you want to do things that you're like are really fun stories too. And you want to, like, if you have a difficult friend, but she's such a good person, you're going to work things out with her, because you want to be 25-year-old Jackie that still has your really good friend, your childhood friend. Or you want to be 25-year-old Jackie who's like, hey, I finally learned how to pole vault, or whatever it is. You're in service to you work for 25-year-old Jackie. It really helps. It really works. I do it 10 years now because I'm older. So, or I do it like I'm in my 50s. So now I'm working for 60-year-old McKinley. I'm in service to 6-year-old McKinley. And it totally works. I just think, well, what do I want to do? I realized I wanted to be running master track meets, and I wanted to live in a dream home. So guess what? I've got an architect designing a dream home. We're budgeting it. We're figuring it out. And I've got a coach, and she's kicking my ass because I want to run a certain time when I'm in the mile, when I'm 60 years old. And there are days that I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to go running. I don't want to do engineering. I don't want to do any of this, but I work for me. So I got to do it.
That is really cool, and
it is the best.
I will take that advice.
It works. It really works.
I know another piece of advice that I've taken from your book that is not on the chapter, is not mentioned, is the spinning your wheels. So like, when you're just worrying about something and like you can't do anything about the thing, you're just worrying needlessly, like you need to stop wasting your energy and stop spinning your wheels, and like go put your energy for something else more productive.
It's the hardest one for me. I still do it. I think it was 2 nights ago I was spinning about a winery that I'm designing with a contractor, and just having a hell of a time. And I was texting my sister and she said, you need a break. I was like, oh, but I've been working all weekend. This is due. She's like, you need 15 minutes. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I do. I need 15 minutes and I need food. Like, it changes everything. And then if you've got to put yourself to bed at 9 o'clock at night and just say, I'm I'm cooked, and get up early and finish it, then you got to do that. Yeah, you got to babysit yourself. None of this is easy. I make it sound just like, oh, and then I wrote a book, and it's everything is twice as hard, 10 times as hard as it sounds. Writing this book, I cried, I got mad, I tried to get out of it, the deadline. I thought it was the stupidest thing. Yeah, I threw little temper tantrums. I was a mess writing this book. But I knew I had to finish it. So none of this is easy. And I think the most important thing that we don't tell young people is if you get started doing something, dance or writing or engineering, and you are in pain because you're so bad at it, that is normal. That's completely normal. That everyone else is suffering the same. All the writers and everyone else in your class are suffering just as much. It's the only difference is the people who suffer and go, okay, but I still have a deadline. I'm still going to do this. That's the only difference.
Yeah, that's how I feel in my chemical engineering classes. We have a Slack channel, and like typically I'm like, wow, like this homework is kicking my butt, and I don't think anyone else is in the same boat. But then I look at the Slack channel and they're like, oh, we don't know what we're doing.
Yes. Has anyone dropped out yet?
We have had quite a few dropout. Our like the graduating class, like the sophomore class chemical engineers is actually the smallest it's been in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I remember being shocked by that. Like second year mechanical engineering, a bunch of the guys dropping out. And I was like, wait, what? That guy's like he failed out, or they'd just get D's and feel like they weren't going to make it, so they would drop out, and tears and phone calls to parents and just brutal. And then I would think like, wait a minute, he was like out every night. Like, why wasn't he studying if he was failing? It's baffling.
Okay, now on to one of my favorite that really stood out to me during your video and in your book is controlling the chaos and entropy. I know last semester I learned a lot about entropy in my physical chemistry class. Good. And just your take on it, and like it's natural for everything to go to chaos. Like, yep. If you have a bad day, blame it on entropy. It's natural.
Yep. Everything's going to hell. Yep.
But do you want to talk about like putting all like controlling your chaos into like one section of your life?
Yeah. So in the chapter, I make the case that you can't avoid chaos. You can't avoid messes, because it's a natural law. I mean, I'm sort of taking liberties with that law, but nature does tend to disorganize rather than organize overall, if you look at overall control volumes. And so if you accept that, some things are just going to be a mess, and very consciously choose where that mess is allowed. For me, it's my car. And I literally just got out of my car after a job site, and I was like, there was something on the windshield, and I was like, what is this? There's like something sticky. Like my car it's just embarrassing. Friends look at my car and they're like, really? Like, yep. Yes, really. Because this is where I allow things to go to hell. My house is pretty well organized. My office is good. My love life, spotless, because there's nothing going on. Like my health, like super picky about getting my workouts and everything, but my car is a junkyard. Even if it's a nice car, it'll be a junkyard within a week. And so my theory is, and it's just kind of silly, but allow a place or a thing or a piece of your life to just suck up all the chaos and be ridiculous, but don't allow it to be your health or your relationship with your kids or something. Like, go ahead and put it in a dumb place, like a junk drawer under the sink or something, and just allow certain things to be a mess, because it kind of tells yourself that you don't have to be perfect, is the sort of the larger point of it. And in this ridiculous talk, I say the reason that I'm able to do all this other stuff is because my car is a mess, and God forbid I clean my car, because then something else will fall apart and I don't know what's going to fall apart. So it's become my own little, like, almost superstition, like just let one thing be junk. And just know that it's really okay. Like no one's gonna call the police on you. It's really okay for that one thing to be a mess, but be conscious about it. And if your whole life is a mess, like I have some friends who just everything they touch is just a mess, and I love them dearly. But I think there's a reason they're doing that, so that they won't be asked, pulled into service by the world, because like I'm useless, I can't do anything. So I think there's some wisdom to just looking at your life and going, what am I allowing to just relax, and what is so important to me that I can't let it be a mess. But if everything's too like tidy and strict, you're gonna fall apart, man. Where does your entropy hide, Jackie?
I think I heard it.
That is a great question.
Pan around your bedroom.
Yeah, this is the reason why I have a background.
Right, that's right.
But
She can be a part.
it varies a little bit. Maybe it's like the
Okay,
clothes on my floor that have yet to be put away.
Yeah.
My desk, which is a
I need an
mess, but
answer.
then I clean it so it's new at the end of at the
There you go.
beginning of the day. It just
Perfect. Yeah,
declines as I progress.
perfect. Right. And if you're too like fussy about every single thing, then you'd never get to move forward.
Final answer. I need a
Yeah.
final answer in 2 seconds.
So another thing that
Okay,
involves
sorry, we're
the dumping ground. So you talked
Rude
about
word.
how people can be
That was
other
Vega.
people's dumping grounds, especially in like
Yeah.
toxic relationships, like whether it be romantic or friendship or anything like that. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Okay, Alpha, what would you
Again, it's like me taking something that's really a psychological terms, and my most trusted frame of reference is physics. And so I go there and note that entropy, big systems tend to disorganize themselves. Like if one side's hot and one side's cold, it's all going to become warm. That's an example of entropy. If you're in a friend group or a couple or a family where it's always on you, to me, that's just a disordered system. If you look at it from a physics point of view, that's not a healthy system. And so if you've become the place where everyone brings their junk and you're the junk drawer of the family or the friend group or the couple, note that that's unnatural and it's not a system that can survive, and it's not fair to you just on terms of physics and science. And I realize that it's a metaphor, I'm stretching it, but if you're a really scientific person and you trust the laws of physics, you can find these little relationships and these little stories within physics that sort of justify you being able to go, no, this isn't right. This doesn't work for anybody in this system. It's such a big thing for me though. It's one of the reasons I really love being single. I love being a spinster because I don't have to worry about that. Like I really get a lot of time to be productive and get in shape and make money and go on vacations. And if I I occasionally meet someone for whom that works, and I date them for a while, but then I don't have to make a huge commitment. And that's partly because I'm really determined to protect my world, which is really precious to me. I've spent a long time, a lot of energy and love building it. And I hope that for every person, but especially every woman, that you build a little empire, whatever that is, that's so precious to you that the cost of entry is really high. Like this person has to be really special and really wonderful and a true gentleman or gentlewoman, whatever you're doing, but you've got to really like set that bar really high.
A question in the chat asks if you know any ways we can identify if we are the person unintentionally dumping our problems on another.
Oh, if we're the person doing it, I know I've been that person. Ask. It's so hard to do, but there's that like, ask, say, am I wearing you out? Am I tiring you? I'm worried that I'm messing with your head, whatever language they can understand. Because often if the person is a dumping ground, their boundaries are so flimsy that they don't even know to speak up. And if you suspect you are, you might be. But there's, it can be a give and take where, on one day they're going to soak up your negativity and make you dinner and pour you a glass of wine. And the next day you're going to rally for them. But if it's consistently one way or the other, to me, that's just not a scientific, it's not a system that can survive. It's going to fall out of balance. Again, I sound like a psychiatrist. I'm not. God forbid.
I know I really enjoy the explanations. It opens my eyes, like that physics is not necessarily like you can just adapt it to like actual life. Like,
yeah, right. And I think it's just because our human brains organize things in a certain way, and that's how we've organized physics. And so it kind of makes sense that the same language and the same gut feelings would apply to life. But if you're like me and you don't necessarily, Catholicism didn't quite do it for you, or whatever spiritual system didn't quite do it for you, but man, do you trust the laws of physics, then this is a really, healthy place to land. Just go, I'm just going to use these and create the rules based on what I know to be true.
So that is all the chapters that I wanted to go over. Are there any other chapters that you want to talk about, Christine?
Who made
Can't
Captain America?
think. I'm trying to remember all that's in the book. I don't think so. The most important thing I remember from learning physics and then remembering learning physics, writing that book, was that when you dive into this thing that seems so hard and impenetrable, and science and math were so hard for me, and I tried to drop algebra in high school because it was so foreign to me, that when you go deeper into the thing that's the hardest for you, there are real rewards in there. If you're that person who's like, oh, I'm just not an exercise person. Like, I've heard so many people say that, and then they get involved in something and they become just stars at dance or whatever they're doing. So that first inclination of like, oh, I'm not a whatever person, I don't know, man. Sometimes it's just dead wrong. Like, who knew I'd be writing I almost failed out of algebra and I wrote a book about physics, and I'm running a, successful engineering company. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, life, you never know what can happen.
I know. And the only difference is to keep going. That's the only difference between me and the students who dropped out of engineering. So I was like, I'll be damned, over my dead body, they're kicking me out of this program. And we just study 1 hour extra and go find the professor during their office hours and ask annoying questions, and just be like, no, they're going to have to drag me off campus. Not leaving.
So speaking of college and careers, we're gonna go on to our next one, which is advice.
I have so many friends who would laugh their asses off if they saw me giving career advice. Like, really? That's what my career looks like right there.
Yeah. So first question is, so do you have any advice for college students in STEM?
Study. Pick one night a week that you're going to go out and have fun, and study every other night. You're going to have to put in more hours than your friends who are not studying STEM, and just know that, and know that the reward is absolutely worth it, more than you know. And if you're not sure what to study in college, study something in STEM, because it will reward you. Even a 4-year degree in math or any kind of engineering is going to be so worth it. Is worth more than a master's degree in in other fields, which is a shame, and it maybe shouldn't be that way, but it's just supply and demand. There just aren't that many licensed mechanical engineers here in Portland, so I get tons of work, and I mess things up all the time and have to go back and correct them. I'm not the best engineer in town. I'm just one of the few. So that affords me some freedom. So major in STEM if you can, any kind of STEM, and study more, and it'll be worth it. And find your professor's office hours and go ask them questions directly, face to face. If you're on the cusp between a B and a C and she's seen you in that office asking her questions and trying, she's going to give you that B.
A follow-up question is, what are your thoughts on like the non-traditional paths after high school, like technical school, just like
Yes.
going right into a career?
I am all for it. I think we make the mistake in education these days thinking that everyone should be college bound. And what we're finding is there are great shortages in trades. And by that, I mean electricians, sheet metal workers, welders. We have incredible shortages right now. And those are ones you can get in through a union or a trade school. I mean, if you want to become a really good car mechanic, you could have your own profitable business by the time you're 25 and be as I like to say, a grown-ass man, grown-ass woman by that age. So I find an organization and get that training. There's a one in Oregon called Oregon Tradeswomen, and it trains women to be carpenters and apprentices and electricians. Also, one of my dearest friends is owns her own hair salon and does color and extensions, and she makes a great living. And her advice is like, go to all the, learn all the new products, go on trips to learn, new coloring techniques, like just become so passionate and involved in technical training in your career that you're just the best. And it's hard to get an appointment with her, and she charges a ton of money. So if you know that there's a demand for something, check out the supply and demand, make sure there's truly a demand for it, that it pays, and that there isn't a ton of people trying to do it. And if you can find that thing, you don't need to go to college. It might not be the thing for you. You might not be able to afford it. You might need to make a living right away. And if you go into some of those apprentice programs, you'll be making a wage right away. And they're not easy. You're going to get up early. You're going to be working outdoors in the cold. And if you're a woman or you're not white, they're going to test you on site. But just keep showing up. Keep showing up. Those are great jobs.
Yeah, I know a couple of Rainbow Girls, I'm not sure if any are on the call tonight, are in cosmetology school working with like hair and stuff, which is really cool.
Good. I've got a hair lady, I've got a lash extension lady, I've got someone who does, facials and nails, and they've all become friends. They're great, and most of them have branched out and formed their own little companies and have their own license and pay rent on a little space, and they have great lives. I see their Instagrams. They're in Maui with their husbands, and like they do fantastic, but they have to be, likable to their clients, and they have to know all the new technology. They've got to, treat it like a serious career, and it's very profitable and fun. And there's my hair gal was telling me, if you don't want to do chair work, and be always on your feet, you can be a rep for a color company and travel all over the world. And there are tons of opportunities for people who stick with it and are polite and have good manners and are smart and will do their homework and show up on time. It's all the stuff that your grandparents probably told you, and it's still true.
So going back to, I guess not STEM specifically, but like a focus in STEM, but women in the workplace. I know STEM, traditionally they're all male dominated. I know you spoke about it earlier, but do you want to elaborate on any advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, since I'm old, I'm 55, my advice might be a little outdated, but I still believe that if you're a woman or a person of color in a workplace where there aren't many of you, I hate saying this, but you really have to be so good. You just have to, I feel like I do more prepped for meetings than my male counterparts. And I'm more sort of like fall over myself to fix things if they're wrong than my male counterparts, because I can't afford to look bad. So, I mean, the only good answer is you just keep showing up and doing good work. I can't count the times I've been hit on by married men. It's just, it's worse than I would have ever thought, to put it that way. And mentors, longtime mentors who just say the wrong thing at the wrong time and, sort of break the relationship between us. And I've been, rage texted by someone who I turned down as a married man. It's tricky to navigate, and I don't think I do anything to bring it on. I'm not flirty in the workplace or anything, but going into that, you have to know it's going to happen. It's horrible that it does happen, but just become the person that's super clear and crisp. And when it starts to happen, say, you're making me uncomfortable, and shoot, you're being creepy. I didn't think that you were going to do that. Just be super blunt and get yourself out of there. And it's tricky. It's tricky, but it also, I think that being a woman in the workplace, I got to register as a woman-owned business, and I get first shot at public contracts. So that's my revenge. Being a woman, big companies want to hire women and people of color. And if you get your own business going and register it as a woman-owned or a minority-owned business, you get other opportunities. So there's pros and cons, and I've been really lucky in that I've been able to make the pros work for me and kind of eliminate the cons. I've hired 2 people in my company, and they're both women, because I've never had a woman hit on me at work. And I just don't want to ever have that happen. So I just hire women. I'm waiting to get sued. It's just, I'm not going to hire men. And we'll see if that ever goes to court. Yeah, and just you have to be like, have your game face on and be super clear with guys. It's not a great answer, I know, but you have to know that it's there. When you're going into an area of the woods in Alaska where there are bears, you have to know there are bears. And you have to be ready and not be surprised or wounded or shocked that it's happening. Like it's going to happen.
What has been your experience owning a business, specifically as a woman? I know you commented on like public contracts, but what else about it?
I love it. I mean, there are people, so a lot of the decision makers for many years were men, at say like airport construction jobs or school construction jobs were men. More and more, these decision makers are women. And so I've 2 projects I've gotten because I've walked into the interview. You turn in a proposal, and then they'll interview like the two best scoring proposals. And in 2 situations, one was a public radio station and one was a college campus, I walked in and the project manager was a woman. And in both those situations, I was not the low number. I was not the best price, but they hired me because I walked in there with my woman employee and, just didn't do anything different. But they said like, wait, are you 2 the ones that are actually going to be doing the work? And in both situations, we got the project because these were women, older women who'd come up in the ranks in areas where they were the minority, and they appreciated seeing other women. And so they wanted to hire us specifically for that reason. They were like, oh God, thank God, more women in the room. And they were willing to actually pay a little more and not take the low bid in that case. And so there is definitely becoming like this sort of like, I don't know, like secret cartel of women who really want to work with each other, and architects, like woman-owned architects from there 2 in Portland that I now work with pretty consistently. And both of them have been like, oh my God, this is lovely. Like women just communicate differently. We love working with you. And so there's definitely sometimes that it's not anything to do with the public contracting process or anything. It's just women wanting to see other women in the room. And there are men like that too. There are developers now, sort of like the more rogue developers who like do things differently and kind of want to do things less expensively and like see what they can, just barely meet code, but do something kind of cool. And I work for a developer like that. He's like, you're the only engineer who doesn't fight me, who kind of goes along with me and sort of rides it out and sees how you can make my vision come true. So I'm using every tool in my toolkit, and one of them just happens to be that I love words and I'm a good listener and I like to do something, creatively because I'm a musician as well. And I think that's all starting to finally at 55 really turn in my favor. So you bring, if you're a scientist, engineer, whatever, you bring all of your tools, all of your, charm and weird, quirky jokes and cultural references, you bring that all into the room.
That is super cool. And
that's the good part.
Good
and you'll
to
get hit
know.
on, but it doesn't matter. It's just,
if there are bears, you got to know that there are bears.
yeah, you just
in
gotta
that
know there are
respect.
bears. Bring your bear spray and be super clear. When they start growling at you, just be like, nah, I'm not that girl. I've even said to a guy one time, I said, I think you've got the wrong impression of me. And he was like, oh God. Like, no, I'm not that girl who's gonna like make out in the bathroom at a bar. Like, ugh, I'm the wrong, no.
So I know you talked about how you graduated from college but didn't necessarily go into your degree field right away. Could you talk about like being flexible with the future and like what different paths you could take?
There's always waitressing. I knew I wanted to go overseas. I knew after college I just wanted to go live in another country. And I chose England because they speak English. I didn't want to have to learn another language. So my friend and I, who works for me now, we just got on a plane and went over to Europe and sort of backpacked around. We each had like $600 and thought we were like rich. So we made it back to London with, $100 each, and both found jobs. Mine was waiting tables, and she was actually doing architectural work, and lived in a youth hostel where we cleaned the bathrooms every morning. It wasn't a glamorous life, but I just wanted to be free. I just wanted to not think about engineering, not go off and get a job right away like some of my classmates were doing, and just felt like, I was 23 and had that degree and was, really angling to do more music, and knew London was a good place to do that. So once you get that trade or that degree, or even before that, you can kind of go off and explore. Just don't completely lose your mind. We had each other, and so we sort of kept tabs on each other, and then we rode our bikes through Israel and got in a little bit of trouble there. But the military, apparently you're supposed to let the American embassy know if you're going to ride your bike through a war zone. Didn't know that. But if you have a powerful degree or trade, you can do that. You can go off and, go to New Zealand and pick apples like my nephew did for a year, and go explore. With a woman, you should probably be with a buddy to be safe. Yeah. Yes, Chris, there is a story there. I've been arrested twice. Okay.
Well,
but you can be flexible once you have that education, or you have that trade, or you have that degree. It buys you that. What are you going to do, Jackie, after you get your degree? I'm afraid I've planted something terrible in your brain.
I've considered, just going and becoming a YouTuber or a streamer, because they make bank. There are 16-year-olds making millions of dollars a year. It's just like,
right. And here's the thing here's the truth about how I became a musician is I could imagine it. I would hear songs and I'm like, I feel like I could do that. And once your imagination grabs hold and starts telling you that you can do it, it knows that you can do that. Like your imagination, I think, is always like a few steps ahead of your like rational brain. And so if your imagination is like, hell, I could do that, it's probably right. Even if it sounds rationally crazy.
Yeah. So I just did those two scenes. Really fun to
So
watch. It's really
those
entertaining,
are
but
all
it's
the
like a
questions that I have right now. So if anyone else has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
Here come the decoded questions. Buddy's really nice. Scott's a little weird.
Mom Jenny, if you would like to unmute yourself to ask a question, you are free to do so.
Oh, thanks, Jackie. It is a pleasure to meet you. My husband is super, super sad. He's working a 24-hour shift tonight. So I told him and he was like, really? The night I'm working? I know. So we are super uber fans of Decoded. So this comes from both of us. So I have to tell, like, it comes from both of us.
Okay.
What was your favorite episode and why?
You know, most memorable was, of course, getting arrested at Bohemian Grove. But my favorite was the Georgia Guidestones. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
They were like those Stonehenge kind of Rosetta Stone Guidestones put up in Georgia. And we interviewed a woman who was a Rosicrucian. And she made so much sense to me. I've already revealed that my faith is physics. I don't really have went to Catholic school, but none of that really made perfect sense to me. Virgin birth, I don't know. So, but talking to the Rosicrucian woman, like the sort of laws that, and I don't remember how much of it was aired, but she made so much sense to me. The idea that you don't have a child until you are physically and spiritually ready to coach another human, and like all of these, like I remember just being gobsmacked thinking like, oh my God, I'm a Rosicrucian. This idea that there are certain basic truths that we need to let the next generation know. And if something, God forbid, were to happen, a terrible flood or climate change that is happening, then we would need to pass on some wisdom to whoever remained, and that this was the Georgia Guidestones were kind of the way of doing that. So in every language, they have these particular rules, like, hey, if we can just tell you 5 things, here are the 5 things. And it was fascinating the things that they chose. Oh, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I just got a little thing saying that my internet was unstable. But anyway, I loved that. That like really hit me on a level of like, we're not going to survive forever as humans, and we're not going to be in this particular form where we've got these countries and we've got this neat little system. It's going to be trashed by a comet or something at some point, and we're going to need to tell that next generation of survivors what to do. And it just hit me so deeply, how we as humans could already care about these people that we know nothing about, that might be 5 generations after us. Like this deep desire we had for them to do the right thing. It's fascinating to me. What was your favorite episode?
The one where you got arrested because you trespassed. So could be that one. Just saying.
Yes, with Alex Jones.
I remember that
Alex
one. And
Jones.
The Statue of Liberty though is probably a good one. The Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, that was weird. Yeah. And when we would interview those people, like the Statue of Liberty guy who felt like that the Statue of Liberty lady was Satan holding the satanic light or something, we would only show the part of the interview that was like somewhat made sense. The rest of the time, the stuff they said was like, wait, are you guys getting this on camera? Because he just said Britney Spears was like the devil. Like they would say things that were just so outrageous that I was like, we have a mental health issue here. And we're interviewing these people like they're experts. No, this person is like actually schizophrenic, which is like a serious medical issue. So there were times that I was like, I cannot believe I'm doing this. This is bad. And Alex Jones was drinking huge pint cups of vodka in the morning. He was trashed by the time we got to site. And he said publicly, like, oh, I don't drink at all. And like, I saw it with my own eyes, vodka going in that man. Like, he's cuckoo.
Okay.
He's cuckoo. And he said what he said about military veterans to Scott and what he said about women to me, the director had to pull us away from him. We were like, no, 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 no. We're not dealing with this guy anymore. The director had to like corner us and say, he's our guest. We have to respect him. I'm like, did you not just hear what that guy said about women? And Scott got in his face with his finger. He's like, I'm a veteran and da 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 da. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. And then they make it into this like, oh, we're all on this mission together. I was like, let him drown. This guy is a waste of space. And then later he lied about it and said that he jumped off a cliff and ran. I'm like, dude, you were blind drunk. So,
Well,
yeah. But then the guy, the guy Greg at the gate. Do you remember the security guard? I ended up dating him for 3 years after that. I know. That's how we met. So we would go for fun when he would come visit, we would go on YouTube and we would watch videos of us meeting each other, but we were dubbed in Italian. And I'm like, do I sound super sexy when I'm talking to him? And he's like, oh my God, yeah. We had like a really wonderful relationship for 3 years. And he couldn't tell anyone at Bohemian Grove he was dating me because he had me arrested. I can't even make this up. It's a crazy story.
Like a tell-all with all of this fun facts, because I think my husband's gonna be really, really sad he missed this now.
Well, yeah.
We do have another question in the chat. What advice would you tell to your 15-year-old self?
I would tell my 15-year-old self that that I'm not the only one in pain and worried. I thought that because of my childhood was a little rough, and I thought that I was somehow disadvantaged. I would tell my 15-year-old self, oh, no, 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 you're fine. You're fine. Everyone's had a rough go of it. Your pain isn't special. You'll be fine. And that if I think something's really hard, that it just means that I'm just going a little bit harder than someone else. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that I'm bad at it. I think when I was 15 years old, when I was trying to do algebra and I was struggling, I thought, oh, that's because I'm not good at math. No, that's because algebra's hard. I think that's especially for 15-year-old girls, I think that we want to get everything right. And we want to be perfect and we don't want to disappoint our parents. But if you're struggling, that means you're on the edge of your abilities and you're right where you need to be.
What?
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for the feeling of perfectionism.
Yeah.
I mean, I still struggle with it, but it's a work in progress.
Right. And if you were going to do everything perfectly, you would have chosen an easier major. You maybe wouldn't have gone to college at all, because then you can get everything, you can nail everything. You can get all A's if you're not doing something super challenging. It was a shock to me, getting into college and getting C's and being like, well, I guess that class is done, C for complete, but it's hard when you're an A student. And it's hard when you're like a really good athlete to go to a different sort of level of competition and go to the state level competition and be like, oh my God, everyone's better than me. But that just means you made it to an arena where everyone's really good.
I think I remember us saying, it's like, do you want to be the smartest in the room, or do you want to be surrounded by smart people? And I think that is an important point.
And any musician knows that the way to get good is to play with people who are better than you. And that means you're probably going to be the one screwing up the song. And so it's hard, it's embarrassing, but that's the only way to get really, really good.
I have a quick question that's like a little random, but it reminds me of like the crowbar chapter in your book. Do you have any advice, whether it be mentoring other people or asking people to mentor you or anything like that?
I haven't been great at seeking out help myself. There aren't a lot of women engineers at all, so it's kind of hard to find them. I do have an aunt, my stepdad's sister, who's my absolute you know, she was like a nurse and then became a lawyer. And she also didn't have kids. I didn't have kids. And we get on the phone probably every week. And I just, tell her everything that's going on. And every time she's like, oh, well, honey, that's normal. It is good to have someone who's not your parent, that really gets you. If it's a old teacher or a grandparent or an aunt or uncle, and they don't have to be in the same field as you, but they just have to kind of know you, that can be really handy. And I found out, like, I'm apologizing to her, thinking like, God, I'm sorry, I have so many questions. And she's like, oh my God, this is the best part of my week. She loves being able to be a resource for me. And she understands my life better than either of my parents could have. Find that person.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I do not see any other questions in the chat. However, it has been a lovely time talking with you,
Thank you.
Christine. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from your book. Again, it's available on Amazon for anyone who wants to buy it. It's awesome.
Thank you.